My name is Ibrahim Traoré. I am the president of Burkina Faso. I say this without pride and without apology. I say it because a name and a title carry weight, and because weight must be acknowledged before it can be carried honestly. Burkina Faso is a small country in land, but not in burden. We live in the heart of the Sahel, where the soil is stubborn, the climate unforgiving, and history never leaves us alone. Our people have known colonial rule, fragile independence, broken promises, coups, counter-coups, and the slow violence of poverty that does not make headlines. Across Africa, different nations wear different flags, but many of our wounds rhyme. Each morning, my work begins early and moves quickly. Short meetings with ministers, security briefings that speak of villages by name, not as abstractions. Reports on food stocks, schools that have closed, teachers who have fled, children who still wait. The numbers are neat on paper, but behind each number is a human face, and that knowledge does not fade with experience. Decisions are demanded with urgency. Yet I know that what I sign in minutes may echo for years, even decades. That awareness follows me long after the room empties. When night comes, I return to my office alone. The silence is not restful, it is demanding. I ask myself questions that have no clean answers. How does a nation stand upright without hardening its heart? How does Africa walk on its own feet without repeating the cruelty of those who once ruled it? How does power avoid becoming a mirror that only reflects itself? That evening, exhaustion won a quiet victory. I had finished reading reports and responding to messages. I leaned back, intending only to rest my eyes. The chair was still warm. The room was dim. Sleep arrived without permission. And that is when the dream began. Not as an escape, but as a confrontation. The first image unfolded without transition. I was standing in a small African square. It could have been in Ouagadougou, or Bamako, or Niamey. The buildings were modest. The ground was uneven. There were no banners, no armored vehicles, no ceremonial order. People stood close to one another, not arranged, not instructed. In the middle of them stood Pope Francis. He was not elevated. There was no platform beneath his feet. No barrier protected him from the crowd. He stood as an old man among ordinary people, listening more than speaking. I saw the poor approach him without fear. I saw young people speak without rehearsed words. I saw former officials, men who had once commanded others, now standing quietly, unsure whether they were seeking forgiveness or understanding. Jesus stood beside me, not looking at the Pope but at me. Africa does not lack strong leaders, he said. Africa lacks a moral compass. Those words settled heavily. I wanted to argue with them. Strength is something we value in the Sahel. Strength keeps villages alive. Strength resists chaos. Strength confronts armed men who have forgotten the difference between faith and violence. But I did not speak. Jesus continued. This man is needed not because of power, but because of conscience. When leadership bows before human dignity, power loses its corruption. As I watched, the Pope did not issue commands. He did not offer solutions. He asked questions. He listened. He allowed silence to exist without fear. I realized that in many rooms where I make decisions, silence is treated as weakness, speed is praised, certainty is rewarded, doubt is hidden. And yet here was a man whose authority came from restraint. I felt a discomfort rise within me. It was not directed at him. It was directed at myself. I have learned how easy it is to justify harshness when one believes the cause is just. I have learned how quickly urgency can silence empathy. A leader can begin to believe that listening is a luxury, and that conscience can be postponed until stability is achieved. Jesus turned to me again. The tyrant is not born from cruelty, he said. He is born from compromise. That sentence struck me more sharply than accusation would have, because compromise often arrives wearing the language of responsibility. I saw myself in another scene. A meeting room. Advisors presenting arguments that sounded reasonable. They spoke of security, of unity, of preventing disorder. They argued that certain voices must be silenced temporarily for the greater good, that certain truths must wait until the nation is strong enough to hear them, that accountability can be delayed because survival comes first. Each argument was logical, each was persuasive, each carried a hidden cost. The temptation was not to become evil. The temptation was to become efficient without conscience. I felt the inner conflict clearly. If I refuse these compromises, I risk appearing weak. I risk losing allies. I risk instability. If I accept them, I gain control, speed, and praise. The danger is not obvious. It unfolds slowly, disguised as necessity. Jesus did not raise his voice. You cannot serve justice and power at the same time, he said. You must choose which one you will disappoint. That truth was difficult to accept. Power demands loyalty, justice demands sacrifice. One offers protection, the other demands vulnerability. I watched Pope Francis bend to speak to a child. The child did not know who he was. That was the point. Authority that requires recognition is already afraid. I understood then what Africa needs from moral leadership, not instruction from above, but a reminder that no office places a human being above dignity. Not foreign control, but a shared standard that transcends factions, religions, and borders. I saw what happens when that compass is lost. Leaders begin to believe they are the nation, criticism becomes betrayal, institutions become extensions of ego, fear becomes a governing tool. The road to tyranny is paved not with hatred, but with small permissions granted to oneself. I felt no condemnation in this vision, only responsibility. I spoke, finally. I am afraid of failing my people, I said. Jesus answered without hesitation. You will fail them if you stop listening. The Pope faded from view, but the lesson did not. It remained like a weight placed carefully in my hands, not crushing but impossible to ignore. I knew then that leadership without moral reference becomes management of decay. Africa does not need saviors. It needs leaders willing to kneel before truth, even when standing would be easier. The image dissolved, and another began to form. The transition was gentle, almost merciful. The square faded, and I found myself walking along a dirt path that cut through villages I recognized without being able to name. The houses were low, the air was warm. Children moved in and out of sight, curious but cautious. Life was not staged here. It was lived. Ahead of me walked a woman. It was Graça Machel. She did not walk with urgency, nor with hesitation. Her pace was steady, as if she understood that change, which lasts, cannot be rushed. She stopped often, not to speak at crowds, but to sit beside women, to kneel so she could meet children at eye level, to ask questions that did not demand rehearsed answers. Do you go to school? Are you safe here? Do you get to choose? There were no banners behind her, no slogans followed her steps. Her influence was not loud, it was precise. Jesus stood close enough that I could feel his presence without turning my head. There is no future for Africa if half of Africa is left behind, he said. I felt the weight of that truth immediately. In meetings, we speak of infrastructure, security, sovereignty, development. We speak of borders and budgets. Too often, women appear in these conversations as beneficiaries, not as pillars. Jesus continued, she is necessary because she lifts, not replaces. When women are protected and educated, societies begin to heal themselves. As I watched, Graça spoke with a young girl whose eyes carried both intelligence and fear. The girl answered politely, but her hands twisted the edge of her dress. I knew that gesture. I have seen it in displaced camps, in villages recovering from violence. It is the posture of someone who has learned to be small to stay safe. I felt something tighten in my chest. I have heard arguments that sound reasonable. They always do. They say culture must be respected, even when it harms. They say change must be gradual, even when delay destroys lives. They say empowering women can wait until security is restored, as if security exists while fear lives in the home. They say education is important, but resources are limited, as if neglect is cheaper than consequence. These arguments are not cruel, that is why they are dangerous. Jesus showed me another scene, a council room, men around a table, myself among them. A proposal lies before us. It would fund schools for girls, strengthen legal protections against early marriage, invest in maternal health. The benefits are clear but not immediate. The costs are visible now. Some advisors warn of resistance. Others fear political backlash. They suggest postponement, not rejection, just delay. The logic is persuasive. We must stabilize first. This will provoke opposition. We cannot fight every battle at once. I felt the pull of that reasoning. A leader must choose priorities. Compromise is sometimes necessary, yet I saw, with painful clarity, what postponement means when measured in human lives. Each year of delay becomes a generation marked by absence. Jesus spoke softly. The cost of justice is always paid in advance. The cost of injustice is paid with interest. I watched women gather water from long distances. I watched girls leave school not because they lacked ability, but because the path was deemed unnecessary for them. I watched mothers teach resilience where protection should have existed. None of this appeared in national statistics with proper weight. The temptation here was subtle. It was to believe that empowering women is an optional chapter, not the foundation. To believe that strength can be built on imbalance. to believe that tradition cannot evolve without being destroyed. I felt conflict within myself. I know that policy alone cannot heal wounds. I know that law does not automatically change hearts. But I also know that silence from leadership signals permission, and permission becomes habit. Jesus turned toward me fully for the first time since this vision began. When women are safe, nations breathe, he said. When they are silenced, nations suffocate slowly. I realized that Africa's recovery will not be measured only by GDP or security reports. It will be measured by whether a girl can grow without fear, whether a woman can speak without consequence, whether families become places of dignity, not endurance. Grâce Michel looked up, as if she sensed my presence, though she did not see me. Her work continued without need for acknowledgement. That too was a lesson. True influence does not wait for applause. I understood then that empowering women is not charity. It is the most durable investment a society can make. It reduces violence not by force, but by healing its roots. It strengthens communities not by decree, but by capacity. As the village scene began to fade, I felt an unexpected emotion rise. Grief. Not only for what has been done to women across Africa, but for how often leadership has treated their suffering as secondary. How many futures have been narrowed because decisions were delayed in the name of caution. Jesus spoke one final sentence before the image dissolved. What you neglect today will rule you tomorrow. The path disappeared, and in its place I saw fire. Not destruction, creation. The fire I saw was not violent. It did not consume, it illuminated. I found myself standing inside a small workshop. The walls were rough. The floor was stained with oil and dust. Light entered through narrow openings, not from polished windows. There was no hum of imported machinery, no screens glowing with distant promises. What filled the space was focus. Young African men and women stood around simple equipment. Some were testing, some were repairing. Some were arguing gently, hands moving as they explained ideas that mattered deeply to them. They were not waiting for permission, they were working. At the center of the room stood Maxwell Chikumbutso. He was not presenting, he was building. His hands moved with familiarity, not showmanship. When something failed, he did not curse the limitation. He adjusted. When something worked, there was no celebration, only continuation. Jesus stood beside me again. Africa does not need to copy another future, he said. Africa must create its own. I felt a quiet tension in those words. For decades, development has been presented to us as imitation. We import models, technologies, frameworks, timelines. We are told that progress looks a certain way, moves at a certain speed, requires certain approvals. When those systems fail here, the blame is placed on our discipline, our culture, our readiness. Rarely on the model itself. Jesus continued, when local intelligence is trusted, freedom begins with energy and technology. I watched as one of the young engineers adjusted a device meant to generate power. It was not sleek, it was not perfect, but it was understandable, repairable, adaptable. It belonged to them. I felt an ache of recognition. Too often, Africa has been positioned as a consumer of solutions rather than a creator. We are told to wait for investment, wait for expertise, wait for transfer. Meanwhile, our youth wait as well. Their minds sharp, their hands idle, their frustration growing. I have sat in meetings where proposals arrive wrapped in complexity, technologies that require constant import, systems that cannot be maintained locally, contracts that promise development but export value. Each sounds reasonable. Each comes with funding. Each demands dependency. The temptation here is powerful. It says, accept what is offered. Speed matters, results matter, visibility matters. Build quickly, even if you cannot sustain it. Show progress, even if it is borrowed. I saw myself in a different room. A delegation presents an energy solution. It is advanced, impressive, foreign. It would solve immediate shortages. It would earn praise. But it requires long-term reliance. Maintenance contracts abroad, expertise that never transfers fully. When it fails, we will wait again. The alternative is slower, riskier, less glamorous. It involves investing in local minds, tolerating failure, defending experimentation against criticism. It requires patience in a world that rewards spectacle. The internal conflict was clear. If I choose the imported solution, I gain stability and applause. If I choose the local path, I accept uncertainty and resistance. I risk being called naive. I risk delay. I risk mistakes made in public. Jesus spoke without raising his voice. Dependence that arrives with comfort still enslaves. That sentence stripped the illusion away. I understood then that technological sovereignty is not isolation, it is dignity. It is the ability to repair what you use, to adapt what you build, to keep value circulating within your own communities. I watched Maxwell speak with a group of students. He did not promise success. He promised effort. He did not shield them from failure. He taught them how to learn from it. This was not innovation for headlines. It was innovation for survival. I thought of Africa's energy poverty, how darkness limits education, how unreliable power stifles industry, how dependency turns basic needs into leverage for others. Technology is never neutral. It carries the values of those who design it. The temptation here is to believe that Africa is late. Jesus corrected that thought before it fully formed. Africa is not late, he said. Africa has been waiting. Waiting to be trusted, waiting to be believed, waiting to be allowed to fail forward rather than be punished for not succeeding immediately. I felt another truth settle in me. When young people see that their ideas matter, they stay. When they see only ceilings, they leave. Brain drain is not a mystery, it is a response to neglect. I saw futures branching. In one, Africa continues importing not only technology, but confidence. In that future, we assemble what we do not own. We consume what we cannot sustain. We remain vulnerable. In the other, Africa invests in appropriate solutions. Not smaller dreams, but grounded ones. Energy systems designed for our terrain. Technologies aligned with our realities. Education connected to purpose. Neither path is easy. Only one is free. Jesus turned to me. You will be tempted to choose what works now over what works later, he said. Remember that speed is not the same as direction. The workshop began to fade, but the heat of that creative fire remained with me. It did not burn, it warmed, it reminded. I understood then that Africa's future does not require permission from the world. It requires belief from within. That belief must be protected by leadership, even when results take time to appear. As the final sparks dimmed, Jesus spoke one last sentence before silence returned. What you build with borrowed hands will never belong to you. The fire disappeared, and the dream grew quiet. I woke before dawn. The room was still dark. The city outside my window had not yet begun to move. Nothing around me had changed. Yet I knew something inside me had, not because I had received answers, but because I had been given principles. And principles are heavier than instructions. I sat in silence for a long time. I did not rush to interpret the dream as prophecy. I did not ask whether it would come true. What mattered was not prediction, but responsibility. Jesus had not shown me a future ruled by one man. He had shown me a path shaped by choices repeated daily. A moral compass that must be consulted even when it slows you down. Women lifted not as symbols, but as foundations. Local intelligence trusted not because it is perfect, but because it is ours. I understood something clearly then. There is no final victory in leadership, no moment when one can rest and say the work is finished. Each day offers the same quiet test. Will I choose convenience or conscience, control or dignity, speed or direction? I am not immune to temptation. I have already made mistakes, some through fear, some through haste, some through believing that silence would protect more than truth. I do not claim moral purity. I claim only the duty to remain awake. Power does not corrupt all at once. It erodes, it whispers, it offers reasonable arguments. It tells you that later is safer than now, that compromise is maturity, that obedience is unity. That is how tyrants are formed, not from evil intent, but from repeated surrender. I think of Africa often, not as a single story, but as millions of lives intersecting with hope and disappointment. I think of elders who remember broken promises, of youth who are tired of waiting, of families who want dignity more than charity. To the Muslim communities of Africa and the world, I say this. Faith must never be used to excuse injustice. God is not honored by fear. He is honored by mercy, restraint, and protection of the vulnerable. To the Christian communities, I say this. Belief without conscience becomes noise. Christ did not rule through force. He walked among the poor and spoke truth to power, even when it led to sacrifice. To leaders of the Sahel and beyond, I speak as a fellow burden bearer. We will be judged not by how long we held power, but by what power did to us. Did it sharpen our humility or dull it? To those watching from the United States, the United Kingdom, and other nations who care about Jesus and leadership, I ask only this. Do not look at Africa as a problem to be managed. Look at it as a mirror. The struggles here reveal truths about power, faith, and conscience that apply everywhere. I do not ask for admiration. I ask for accountability. I ask for prayer, if you believe in prayer. I ask for honest dialogue, if you believe in truth. The future of Africa will not arrive through one speech, one leader, or one dream. It will arrive through moral clarity, the elevation of women, and trust in our own minds. It will arrive slowly, and it will demand courage. As for me, I will continue to choose, sometimes well, sometimes poorly, but never without awareness. If these reflections resonate with you, if they challenge you, or even if they trouble you, stay with this conversation, share your thoughts, walk alongside this journey, not as spectators, but as participants in a world that still has the capacity to choose differently. Because each day, I wake up and must choose again. There is no final victory, only vigilance or surrender.